So vagus nerve's been getting a lot of attention lately. I think we're all seeing it everywhere, polyvagal this and that. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. And but one of the things that I'll say is that it's not new, right? Like this is just having new language for something that is just inherent and biological. And so it's not like the new flashy neon sign. It's just something that's getting, I think there's a lot of valid reasons why this is getting good attention right now, because we recognize how attending to the vagus nerve can actually really allow us to attend to imbalances in the autonomic nervous system that contribute to very significant health problems and throughout the lifespan, right? Like if you're familiar with something called the Adverse Childhood Experiences Scale or study, this was a study that looked at the relationship between adverse childhood events like childhood neglect, abuse, whether that was sexual, physical, emotional, experiences of parents getting a divorce, experiences of parents using substances, an incarcerated member of the family, and so on, that those events are so strongly correlated with adverse chronic health issues in adulthood, chronic heart conditions, obesity, liver disease, a phenomenal correlation here. And so the vagus nerve really helps us understand more about what happens when we get stuck in the on position or get stuck in the off position from that and move out of that rhythmic flow between sympathetic and parasympathetic. What happens when we lose the ability to sleep well at night and we're stuck in the keyed on place, or what happens when, as it came up in a consultation I did recently, when you're 19 years old and you're scared to walk up a flight of stairs because your heart rate increases and you can't tolerate that sensation, right? So that people get stuck in smaller and smaller arenas of life because we haven't developed that capacity to be with more mobilized states without it leading to another crash. So we'll unpack as much as we can here, but the vagus nerve is basically described as a bidirectional information highway, and the majority of that communication goes from body up to brain, particularly gut up to brain. And our gut, what we know about our kind of gut brain is that there is tremendous intelligence. All of the same neurotransmitters that used to be just associated with intelligence in the brain matter are found in the gut, and they're produced by the gut. So when people talk about the belly brain, there really is an intelligence. These same neurotransmitters are also found in the heart and are produced by the heart. These neurotransmitters are found all along the spine and are produced by the spine. We see receptor sites for the neurotransmitters that are produced in the brain, the heart, along the spine, and in the belly. We see receptor sites for those neurotransmitters and neuropeptides on the immune system cells. And so the ability, if you think about a neuropeptide or a neurotransmitter, it's basically our emotion chemicals. If any of you are familiar with the work of Candace Pert and her book, The Molecules of Emotion. So we have these emotion chemicals. There may be our feel-good chemicals, or maybe it's the chemicals that release when you have a good cry, right? Or when you're authentically feeling your anger. Your body has a felt response, right? Anger is not just up here. It's a whole body experience. Sadness, grief, a whole body experience. And when we're in alignment, when we're authentically feeling what is true for you, when you're in that zone, your immune system syncs up around it. It actually guides the health of your entire body. There's a coherent state that goes, oh, this just makes sense. I'm not suppressing that feeling. I'm not pushing that down. There's actually movement. There's flow. So this bidirectional information highway is that when 80% of that is going up to the brain. So when we're trying to use what we call top-down interventions in therapy, when we're trying to think our way out of a feeling, we're working against gravity. We're working against our biology. So when we are in sync with what's feeling and allow what's moving through us to move our bodies, and when we allow our bodies to be moved by how we feel inside versus how someone's telling us to move, right? Then we're in sync with that flow. We're actually kind of moving with the river rather than trying to swim upstream. So allowing the body to inform the brain, allowing the body to inform our movement, right? Like often I'll use the frame, allow your sensations to be your guide, right? Let the sensations guide the movement, because that allows us to work with biology. Right? Now, here's another key phrase here, which is from Steve Porges. And he says, everyone gets so excited about the vagus nerve, but really the vagus nerve is the power cord. Now, we all know our power cords are really important, right? Like how many of us have left the house, our phone's at 10%, and we're like, man, I forgot my power cord, or our computer's low, right? I need my power cord. So the power cord is really important, but what are we going towards? What are we powering? And what is really creating balance in the autonomic nervous system is the brainstem. And here is where in the medulla and in the pons and in the cerebellum is where we're really creating lasting change of autonomic system balance. It's not in the vagus nerve itself. But the vagus nerve lets us bring the information from body to brainstem and integrate that information for the purpose of lasting change. So the vagus nerve always has an inhibitory influence on the sympathetic nervous system. It's the brakes that are basically, if you think of that sympathetic nervous system as that metaphorical gas pedal, the vagus nerve is the vagal brake that will reduce the sympathetic activation. And that has several different layers of presentation, and we'll get into that as we go. So a little bit more about the vagus nerve, right? And if you're in the US, you get the what happens in Vegas doesn't stay in Vegas joke. And if you're not, this is a Las Vegas joke, and it's it says what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's not really true. Okay, so this image on the slide, I will give credit to Gabrielle Cram, a beautiful image here that really helps us see some of the different aspects here or circuits in the vagus nerve. But in general, the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. It works with other cranial nerves to integrate feedback from eye movement, sound, swallowing, touch, head movement, jaw movement, tongue, breath, digestive organs, and all of the interoceptive sensory input. Okay, that's a lot, it's a long list. It's a lot in there. And again, the vagus nerve is basically gathering all of this sensory information, and it's sending that up for the purpose of brainstem regulation of our body. And it goes through the brainstem. It eventually can make this information can make its way into higher brain centers. The thalamus helps route it into limbic and upper cortex areas, and so on and so forth. And that's for the next, if you join me for the long course, we'll go into all that. But for our purposes today, let's really understand that the vagus nerve has two primary circuits. You want to think about it that way. It has the ventral vagal circuit, what we refer to as the social engagement system. And this is that portion of the vagus nerve that largely resides above the diaphragm. So if you look at the green in the picture, that portion of the vagus nerve is going into the diaphragm, the lungs and the heart, the larynx and pharynx in the throat, around the muscles of the face, into the inner ear, around the eyes. And if you think about social engagement and why this is referred to as the social engagement system, it's really about connection as a biological imperative. It's our most recently evolved portion of the vagus nerve that allows us to connect with others for the purpose of dampening down our defensive systems. We dampen down fight flight for the purpose of social connection. The red in this picture is the rest of the vagus nerve. This is the dorsal vagal circuit, largely below the diaphragm, but as you can see, not solely, but it's mostly the part of the vagus nerve that's associated with our digestive organs, and actually can run all the way down into the bowels, as you can see in the lowest portion there. It's deeply connected into where we're going to digest, where we're going to also maybe shut down digestion for the purpose of defensive activation. And it's going to also have shared neural circuits into the heart and the lungs, and has some shared neural circuitry up into the face. So sometimes what we see when someone is shut down, right? Because this dorsal vagal has two expressions. It has a rest and digest when we feel safe, but it can lead us to collapse when we don't feel safe. It can lead into a immobilization, into a faint response. So if we pause on this word immobilization, right? Sympathetic nervous system is our mobilizing part of the nervous system. The vagus nerve facilitates, or the parasympathetic nervous system facilitates, an immobilization response. It immobilizes our defenses for the purpose, when we're safe, of social connection and intimacy and loving states. But when we don't feel safe, we immobilize into a collapsed state for the purpose of survival. And that typically occurs when there is some experience of feeling trapped. There's no way out of this situation. It's chronic stress that's ongoing and there's nothing I can do to stop it. So I feel powerless and helpless. Or it's an event that occurs where I experience the threat of death. And it's that last ditch attempt to survive, because it basically, if we think about it as a faint response, it's going to put the body into a collapsed state in hopes that someone will actually take me for dead and walk away, or it will put the body into this collapsed state, into a faint response, which actually is going to send the blood back to the brain for the purpose of survival. Also, there's often a nausea response with this, which is basically ejecting anything that's toxic or poisonous. So if you think about the near death of having ingested a poison, it's very smart, if you had food poisoning, for your body to get rid of that. Right? So there's intelligence to all of these states. But what we don't want is to get stuck in them. And what I see in my work with individuals with chronic health conditions is that that's the primary struggle, is being stuck in one of these imbalanced nervous system states. So this is really the key to, what I love sharing with this material is, how do we get unstuck? How do we engage in any embodiment practice? Yoga happens to be the one that I resonate with really strongly, but there's others. I love body mind centering and I love authentic movement, right? So I integrate a lot of these modalities, but how do we get unstuck?